1968, the Black Year. The US government looked the world in the eye and said, "We had no soldiers in Laos." They were lying. This is the story of the men who didn't exist, fighting a war that wasn't happening. No ranks, no names, no US markings. If you were captured, you were on your own. If you were killed, you were never there. This is the real life Black Ops. The Studies and Observations Group. A boring name for a terrifying purpose. SOG was a top secret unit that utilized unconventional warfare fueled by plausible deniability. They were the elite of the elite, tasked with the impossible. Strategic recon, sabotage, kidnappings, prisoner rescues deep in enemy territory. They were a joint task force, a greatest hits of killers pulled from the Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Marine Recon, and Air Force Commandos. But they weren't just Americans. They fought alongside indigenous tribes, warriors who knew the jungle better than the enemy. The Pentagon told the public the war was in South Vietnam. SOG knew better. Their playground was the denied areas of Laos, Cambodia, and the North. They moved in spike teams, tiny units of 6 to 12 men dropped into the heart of the North Vietnamese machine to find the Ho Chi Minh Trail. But you didn't just walk into Laos with a standard kit. SOG operators were ghosts. They wore sanitized uniforms. No rank, no names, no US markings. They carried sterile weapons, unmarked Swedish Ks or modified carbines, so that if a body was found, it couldn't be traced back to Washington. Secrecy wasn't just a rule, it was their only armor. When things went wrong for SOG, and they often did, the result was a brand of violence few units in history have ever witnessed. A SOG firefight wasn't just a tactical exchange, it was an explosion. Outnumbered 100 to 1, these men didn't aim, they erased. They would dump entire magazines on full auto, creating a wall of lead to trick the NVA into thinking they were a battalion and not just a 6-man team. They carried sawed-off RPDs and XM177s with jungle-taped magazines, packing 30 spares at a time. In the Green Hell, running out of ammo was a death sentence. Combat was so close, often less than 5 meters, that operators would literally bump into NVA soldiers on the trail. But when the walls closed in and the team was about to be erased, they triggered the ultimate panic button. Prairie Fire. This was a distress call that diverted every aircraft in Southeast Asia to a single set of coordinates. Extraction was a suicide mission. In order to clear a landing zone, they'd blow claymores while A-1 Sky Raiders were dropping napalm so close, it scorched the hair off the operators' faces. And if the birds couldn't land, they'd hook into stable rigs, dangling 500 feet in the air, human targets swinging under a chopper while anti-aircraft fire tore through the sky around them. SOG held a casualty rate of 100%. Every soldier who was in a unit long enough was pretty much guaranteed to either be wounded or killed. Some years, the number of casualties actually surpassed the number of people who were assigned to the unit itself. But when a team went missing, this is where things were notoriously dangerous. No man left behind. If a team goes missing, the SOG sends in Bright Light teams to recover them. Bright Light was the code name for a combat search and rescue mission. If a recon team was compromised or surrounded, or a pilot was shot down in enemy territory, the Bright Light team was to get them out. While standard recon teams had days or even weeks of planning and briefing, Bright Light teams were always ready to go without any prep time. When shit hit the fan, they had minutes to grab their gear and hit the helos. They weren't going in to observe and sneak around the enemy without them knowing. They were going into a hornet's nest. The enemy knew where they were. Due to these missions being short and intense, loadouts had to be specialized. Rather than bring rations, they would bring extra ammunitions, grenades, and claymore mines. They would even bring body bags because SOG had a strict no man left behind policy. Even if their comrade had fallen, they would bring their remains home. The North Vietnamese army was ruthless. They quickly adapted and learned how the SOG operated. If they were able to take down a helicopter or team, they would not immediately kill the survivors. They would surround the site with AA guns and machine guns, wait for the bright light team, and then ambush them, essentially using the survivors as bait. While most bright light missions were successful and rescued allies and Americans, many teams were also wiped. Their sacrifice had not been in vain. Their tactics became the foundation of modern Spec Op rescue units like the Air Force PJs and Navy SEAL rescue elements. For decades, these stories didn't exist. They were buried in classified vaults and redacted archives. When SOG was deactivated in 1972, the men were sworn to silence. The US government wouldn't even formally admit they existed until the early 90s. Think about that. For nearly 20 years, their sacrifice was a state secret. While regular soldiers received medals of honor in the light of the White House lawn, SOG operators received theirs in the shadows. Private rooms, redacted citations, locations changed to hide the fact that we were fighting a war where we shouldn't have been. They came home to a country that didn't know their names, for missions the world wasn't allowed to know happened. They were ghosts. But SOG wasn't just a unit. It was a laboratory for death. Before them, special ops meant large-scale raids. SOG proved that 6 men in the dark could achieve more than a battalion in the light. They pioneered the 12-man A-team. They mastered the black arts of psychological warfare and dirty tactics. Every Delta Force operator, every Navy SEAL, and every Tier 1 unit working in the shadows today is a direct descendant of the ghosts in the Vietnam jungle. They set the tone, and they paid the blood price. Over 300 Americans died under the SOG banner. 50 of them are still there, MIA, resting in unmarked graves in lands we officially never entered. To the Pentagon, they were a budget line. To the public, they were nothing. To history, they were just a number. The war was secret. The deaths were real. The ghosts remain.